Beth, as you can see, who's joined us now. Beth, great to have you with us. Look, Angela Rayner, they're visibly upset as you put in those questions to her towards the end of that conversation, saying that she thought about resigning, but she's not going to. She's going to tough it out. But just how damaged is she by all of this? As you point out, she's the Secretary of State for Housing.
Look, this is a very complicated story involving her son, who has special needs, who is under 18, Angela Rayner, and her tax arrangements. And it now appears that she might owe more tax. She admits to wrongdoing. She said she made a mistake, and she was unable to disclose some of this information until today because there was a court order. This was all agreed in a family court when she and her husband divorced, and a trust was set up for her son. It's very complicated, and we've got all the details of the ins and outs of that on our website. But just in terms of where we are now, I think there's a few things to say about that. One, you could see a Deputy Prime Minister, normally extremely robust. Angela Rayner in that interview visibly upset, holding back the tears as she talked about her family arrangements, the fact that this had come into the press, the fact she wanted to try and protect her children who are under 18, and as I said, one of them with disabilities that will need lifelong care. And then there are questions about, aside from all of that, she's the Deputy Prime Minister, she's the Housing Minister, and it looks like she has made an error in terms of tax owed. She has referred herself to the Standards Commissioner, so the Prime Minister's standard advisor is now looking at the case. She has also informed HMRC that she could have underpaid on stamp duty for the Hove property that she bought, and she could be liable for a tax bill of tens of thousands more pounds. Look, her argument here is, I took initial legal advice. I was told that I could treat Hove, her home on the South Coast, as her main property. She paid the tax expected, and then when all this came out in the press, she's told me that she took expert counsel and then was advised that actually she could be liable for extra tax. Now, she's insisting that she did this in good faith, that she made a mistake. She's really appealing to people to believe what she says about that. Later on in the interview, I put to her things that she said in the past about people dodging tax, and does this look like she's dodged tax? Does this look like she's flipped her home? I also asked her about the Prime Minister. Did she offer her resignation? We go into all of that detail. She says that Keir Starmer understands the situation and has been very supportive of her. I asked her whether she thinks she will be exonerated, and she simply said that's up to the Standards Commissioner. She insists that this was a technicality. She made an error in good faith. I asked her about whether or not this was irreparable damage to her and her career, and she said that is for the public to decide, and now she is under investigation, and we'll have to see what the outcome of that investigation is.
Beth, just before we talk a little bit more about Angela Rayner and about her background and how that plays into some of the reporting around all of this, talk to us about what the Independent Standards Commissioner could actually find. How could that end up, that report end up influencing her position?
Well, look, I can talk to you a bit because I've been looking at this very carefully. It's an extremely complicated case. Basically, she had a home in Ashton with her ex-husband, and they had made that the main family home for the children that they share parenting duties of. And as I said, her eldest child is disabled and will need lifelong care, and that home has been specially adapted for her son. In 2020, there was a special trust was set up, and she has transferred her 25% ownership of that house into that trust. Because she had done that, she thought that she was not liable for that being her main home for tax purposes because she had transferred the money to a trust in which she has no beneficiary. It belongs to her son, who, as I said, has special needs and needs lifelong care. She then took that equity, she bought a place in Hove, she did a 20% deposit like lots of us do, she got a mortgage for the rest, and for tax purposes she was advised that that was her main home and she paid the appropriate stamp duty. Now, it appears that that was an error, that because her son is under 18, she as the parent still has an interest in that trust, and that should have been her main home designation. And so the complexity around this is she actually looks like she could be liable for stamp duty, additional stamp duty as a second home on the place in Hove. That is the complexity of it. And it's made all the more complex because it involves her family, her former husband, it involves a property, and it involves, of course, her children. One of them, as I said, that she's very protective of, who has special needs, and perhaps she did not want to disclose that. In fact, I know she didn't want to disclose that because she made that quite clear in the interview that she discussed this with her family, and they were supportive about her explaining all of this stuff. The reason she couldn't do it earlier was because it was subject to a family court, so she had to get approval from the court. So that's the backstory to it, and it is really complicated. And as I said, if you want to know all the ins and outs, please look on the Sky News website, and it will detail all of that. It took me a while to get my head around it too. But the issue is essentially, did she owe more tax? Yes. Should she pay that tax? It will probably be, I think, that she will have to pay that additional tax. And what the Standards Commissioner will look at is whether there was wrongdoing here. And she will argue that this was a technical error, that she took legal advice and was advised that she could make the Hove property her main residence, that she paid the standard amount of tax, that when it was called into question, it came up in the press, she thought she was okay. She took then expert legal counsel. She was given different advice on that advice. She then contacted HMRC. She referred herself to the Standards Commissioner, and now it is up to him. He will decide whether there was wrongdoing or whether this was a technical error, which is what Angela Rayner will argue. She will give him all the paperwork, and he will take that decision. And if he decides that this was breaking the ministerial code, then her future is in question, undoubtedly. So, I asked her, do you think you'll be exonerated? She said, that's not for me to say. All I can say is lay out the facts of the case. Now I've had the court order lifted, she can lay out the facts of the case and leave it for people to decide. But politically, of course, this is extremely damaging for her. She has ran her brand on being a working class woman that's worked her way up through the ranks, that plays by the rules. She's talked a lot about tax dodging and how that should be clamped down on. And now she finds herself in a position where it has, she's been accused of tax dodging, and now it emerges that she has paid probably the wrong level of tax. And so it's kind of partly in the court of the public domain about how people feel about this. As I said, she's given a very long explanation of it, and I think it will be for the public to decide. What I can say about it was, I personally have interviewed Angela Rayner a number of times. I've never seen her that visibly upset. It was clearly very difficult for her to talk about her children, who, while she's in the public domain, she is seeking to protect. And as I said, the Prime Minister has been very supportive. Now there is a process, and it might end up, and I'm speculating because it is a process, that she's going to have to pay additional tax, and then the Standards Commissioner will issue a report as to whether or not she's broken the ministerial code. I guess the big question is, will she survive that? I asked her that. She said it's up to the Standards Commissioner. But the bigger question too is, how much does this damage her reputation, and how much scrutiny will she now face? Now, it has emerged, and she has admitted in her statement, which I have here, she says here, if I can find it, I deeply regret the error has been made. I'm committed to resolving this matter fully and providing the transparency that public service demands. So she admits there that there was an error and a mistake, and now she has referred herself for scrutiny to the Standards Commissioner.
Certainly has, and as you say, Beth, the Standards Commissioner will decide whether or not the ministerial code has been broken. You can confirm for us whether or not that then leaves it up to the Prime Minister to decide, or whether it's incumbent upon Angela Rayner to take that decision to then resign at that point if she has broken the ministerial code. But on that statement, Beth, I've got it here in front of me, and it's a long statement which gives in detail context as to why this decision was made. And when we get to the meat of all of this, it's just one paragraph. You've quoted some of it there. I want to quote some more of it here, because I think it is interesting that in this statement from the Deputy Prime Minister, she tells us why. She tells us why we've had this news for the summer, this story swirling around this home, and how she managed to reach this point, and we're now, we're able to talk about it because of the lifting of that order. She says in the statement, in the pertinent paragraph here, I have now been advised that although I did not own any other property at the time of the purchase, the application of complex deeming provisions which relate to my son's trust gives rise to additional stamp duty liabilities. I acknowledge that due to my reliance on advice from lawyers which did not properly take account of these provisions, I did not pay the appropriate stamp duty at the time of purchase. And she said she's working with expert lawyers now. She's referred herself to the HMRC as well. So look, I mean, owning up, hands up to what had gone wrong, saying that she was given bad advice at the time. She's now sought better advice. I'm interested in what you say about the Prime Minister and his support for her now, whether or not that will continue. Because as you say, Angela Rayner's brand is built on her being an ordinary person. Her website opens with, Angela is not an Oxbridge-educated former special advisor professional politician. She grew up on a council estate. She left school with no qualifications, with a baby on the way. That's the opening paragraph of her own website. So I just wonder how, when all of this plays out, she will be received within the party and, of course, within the court of public opinion.
There's so many questions in that, Kamali. I mean, look, the first thing to say is that I asked her about whether she'd offered her resignation to the Prime Minister. I asked her what his position was, and she said that Keir Starmer had been incredibly supportive and understands her private family arrangements. But as to whether or not he will exonerate her or not, Keir Starmer, a former lawyer, he will go through a process. I think part of the reason that this has been announced now is before Prime Minister's questions, because undoubtedly it will be raised in the Commons. And now he has a statement from his Deputy Prime Minister, and we will hear more from him. And I think there will be a process now, and they will go through that process. But as you said in that key paragraph, she said she admits she did not pay the appropriate stamp duty. She says she's working with expert lawyers. And I think when I was with the HMRC, with the tax inspectorate to resolve the matter and pay what is due, and I think what came across with me in that longer interview, because we only played an excerpt of it, is that she's feeling very sore indeed about this reputational damage, about it looking like she is a tax dodger. And she says a number of times in this interview with me, I've always played by the rules. I've never tried to avoid tax. I've tried to be scrupulous in my conduct in public life in order to avoid this sort of controversy. And she is clearly very upset, I think, about the reputational damage and the accusations that she is a tax dodger. And I mean, she's admitting herself that she has made a mistake on tax, so that label can be, in a way, levelled at her. She has given out the reasons as to why she couldn't put it out further. And now, really, there will be a process here. Well, this will be picked apart, this very detailed statement. There will be, I'm sure, loads more questions about the trust and when did she transfer the money and what did she know when. But what I think we had today was a Deputy Prime Minister being in the news for days and days, unable to answer some of the charges about her tax status, because, as I said, this detailed information about her son was subject to a family court order, and it was only with her ex-husband's permission and discussing it with her children that she decided to make this public. And she has decided to make this public in order to, as she put it to me, clear her name and restore her reputation. And as I understand it, I think her family were supportive of her doing that because they didn't want Angela Rayner to be portrayed in a way that her family and her feel is unjust in their view. So I think this will have loads to run. We've now finally, after days of reporting and radio silence from the Deputy Prime Minister, we have her first interview. You can see her explanation on camera, but there are lots more questions. And as I said, there is now an investigation by the Standards Commissioner and also the tax revenue. And it will be, I think, Angela Rayner will end up paying tens of thousands of pounds more in tax to write this bill that she clearly still owes and admits in her statement that she does owe. As I said, she is saying she relied on advice from lawyers which did not properly take into account the provisions of the trust that she had set up for her son, who has lifelong needs. And now, as I said, in a way, it's partly in the court of public opinion, and I'm sure it will be chewed over extensively in the coming days.